everyone. Today we have Daniel from Clear B2B. So, Daniel recently wrote a LinkedIn post where he spoke about creating an ideal customer profiles for B2B companies. And we found it really interesting because he didn't just share a framework, he combined insights from industry legends with 350 plus hours of researching and consulting. So, today we have Daniel to discuss a bit in detail. Thanks for joining, Daniel.
You bet. What's up, everybody? Good to be here. Hi.
Before we jump in, do you want to tell us a bit about your current role?
Yeah, so I run a company called Clear B2B, and what we specialize in is help companies, B2B companies, find the one GTM motion that will put them through their next growth ceiling, which is usually around $10 million, because what we are seeing in the marketplace after having worked with a bunch of companies is that companies in their go-to-market tend to spread themselves thin in channels, strategies, shiny objects, tools, and everything. And it's a counterintuitive approach to growth. And this ties right into what we're going to talk about today, which is the ICP. And the counterintuitive nature of it is that you would think that the more things you do, the faster you will grow and the more successful you will become. And that is just not the case for companies that have not yet reached a certain level of maturity. So the key thing in growth tends to be, when you're below $10 million a year, the key thing tends to be finding that one motion that takes the customer from not knowing you all the way to signing a deal and then to retaining them, and making that motion as super streamlined and easy and efficient as possible, and then just keep doing more and more of it until you're ready to grow and add more channels and add more motions. So in a nutshell, that's what we do.
Okay, that's great. Let's get started. The first question I want to ask you is you mentioned about niching down ICP is a counterintuitive path to growth. Can you unpack that for us?
Yeah, sure thing. So the reason why niching down to just one ideal customer profile is that when you were a founder, you're usually desperate for results and money. And there's this drive in us that dictates that, whoever is willing to give me money, I'll just take it and grab it. And there's nothing wrong with that when somebody wants to come and you can serve them properly and you'll take their money. But the thing is that what companies are often unwilling to do is to narrow their focus so that their delivery and their messaging can be more streamlined and focused, because they are afraid of missing out on 95% of the market, 95% of the opportunities. So the common thinking is that if I don't talk to everyone, then only very few people are going to hear me. And I'm going to have a much harder time with those very few people. But the reality is, contrary to that, is that when you only speak to one use case, one user type, one customer profile with one problem, then you're going to come across way stronger, way more differentiated, which is exactly what you need in the beginning.
Right.
When you have not yet grown.
Perfect. So, next question that I would like to ask you is you mentioned 5 steps to nail ICP. Can we go over to it?
Yeah. So there are many ways to skin the cat. And yeah, we can just start with this. So usually what we try to do first is determine your strengths and your vision, meaning what is it that your service or your product is capable of? And we always start with that as well as the founder vision. Okay, so what would we be the best position to do? Okay, and usually when we're talking about earlier stage companies, you will still already have had some experience with early clients, testers, whatever. So you'll have a good idea of that. Later stage companies have it easier because you have some amount of data and experience to back it up. Okay, and so first you look at your capabilities, like what are we really good at doing? Okay, the second step is figuring out who would be the best fit for this type of service or this type of product. So then you would go into First, you start with the firmographics, meaning geography, company size,
Right.
industry. And this is where most people stop, and that's a problem. And the reason that's a problem is because you need to go much deeper, because these things aren't indicative enough of what your specialized solution is capable of. So rather than being stuck here and putting on like an industry or a vertical mindset, what you want to explore is go over to the jobs to be done methodology, which means focusing on what it is that your target customer will be doing with your solution. More specifically, what is their day to day, understanding their role, their challenges, their goals, their pains, their whatever, and treating that as a starting point. The reason this is super important is because you want to be focused on, we live in a solution focused world, right? So we have in B2B, we have problems and then we deliver solutions to that. Okay. So it's not like people want to look better or whatever. It's,
Right.
we want to have must have products and must have solutions rather than nice to have ones. And the way to find, if you have a nice to have solution, like you have a cool widget, a cool feature, which might bring money and whatever, and you can't really tie it to the bottom line, you can't really tie it to an important critical outcome, then you're going to have trouble. Then you're going to have trouble. And that's why when you go to jobs to be done, what you're actually doing is you're tying your solution into a critical outcome of the person you're wanting to serve. Okay. So that's the first thing. No, it's the third thing we mentioned. It's not the first thing, but it's jobs to be done. It's like the most important part of this. And what's going to come out the other end is, if you think about it, very often the use cases with which people use your product is going to be the same across verticals. So a lot of times when you go through this exercise of narrowing down, you're going to find that, contrary to what people are used to thinking, that, okay, we're going to do banking or mining or fintech, and they segment by vertical. For most companies, it's going to make sense to segment by use case. Okay, it's like, how are people using your product? Because you might find that your target persona uses the product in a very similar way, whether it be health tech or mining or education or whatever vertical. So then that is going to make sense. Okay. And so once you have this use case, you're going to have a really good idea of how to go further and how to start crafting the positioning of what it is that you do.
Interesting.
Right.
I have one question.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, how do you think AI-driven personalization would affect ICP development in the next 3 to 5 years?
Okay. And when it comes to AI, first off, I'm a huge fan of AI, and we use it day in, day out in almost everything. But in this particular case, AI-driven personalization like shouldn't be pushed to the forefront. So we're pretty big about starting with strategy and business fundamentals and then adding AI. Just a side note, I don't understand consultants and agencies who claim that they're AI first, because in my thinking that's the total opposite of what you want to be, because you don't want to be led by technology, you want to be led by business fundamentals. So when it comes to AI, I would flip your question a little bit, which is a great question, by the way, and I'm very glad that you brought it up. So when it comes to AI, I think what you do at this phase is do a bunch of research. Use it to do secondary research. It's not going to substitute speaking to your customers, but it almost can, okay? Because one of the fundamentals when you're doing ICP research is that you have to know your customer really well. And guess what? With the latest models, the deep research models from DeepSeek or Perplexity or OpenAI, like you get like some serious shit data and insight and research from these things that are valid. Okay. Again, I want to underline that it doesn't substitute talking to actual humans who are going to buy your product, but it's a very good start. Okay. So it's a very good start. So that's where I would use AI. When it comes to personalization, and I think what you're referring to is it can be tempting to think that I can just serve the whole world because when somebody arrives on my website, then I will be able to spot where they're coming from. And I'll be able to serve the perfect content that is like custom tailored to their freaking company and role and age and hair color and taste and whatever. And theoretically, that's a possibility, but I've never really seen it work out. And the thing is that, especially when you're talking about higher value deals, which is what I usually deal with.
Plus,
So
there's a possibility of wasting a lot of resources as well.
yeah, it takes a ton of resources to do that. So it might sound easy. It might sound like turning on a couple of switches in your whatever platform. But the reality is, when you talk to people who have done that, they have almost always regretted doing deep personalization at the top of the funnel because it's not going to be 100% accurate. And it just takes too freaking long to set up. And in addition to that, you don't really need to personalize that much when you're beginning to talk to people. So you don't need a lot of personalization at the top of funnel because in order to get my attention and in order to have me talk to you, there's only a few things that you need to be hitting on. Like if you know what I'm doing, what my job is, then you can talk to the challenges that I'm facing, likely. And then you can say, hey, we've solved this challenge for, I don't know, a lot of other companies like yours. So all you have to know is what I'm doing. And all you have to do is do your jobs to be done homework and then identify if I really fit that. And then you can get my attention.
Oh.
So there's not a lot more needed. So you don't have to like reference my favorite restaurant, not because I don't have one, but because it just doesn't make sense. But later down, so like when you progress further down in the deal with your salespeople, then you're going to do a super deep discovery. And then you're going to personalize everything that comes after that. So when you send across a pitch deck and whatnot after you've had a discovery call, like that has to be super personalized. But AI plays less of a role in the personalization there because it's more about understanding the client's problems and needs and then figuring out how to tailor your existing content. And AI will be a co-pilot in that. So yes, they can summarize the calls and then give you ideas on how to personalize or whatever, but it's not AI driven personalization, quote unquote. That's a long answer to your short question.
To what sort of KPIs improvement did you see?
When we applied the proper ICP
Yeah.
framework, or yeah. Okay, so the improvement is usually significant. So what I'm talking about is that when we are called in to help, there's almost always a problem with not targeting the right ICP and not being narrow enough. Okay. And so when we fix that, then a lot of good things happen. And it's not just like one KPI that's affected, but something that comes to mind is, for example, a campaign that we did or that I was personally involved in a couple of years ago, where we had a software company that was targeting, again, every industry and every use case and whatnot. And through a lot of work, we narrowed things down to just two main audiences. And then we didn't tell everybody else to get lost. But when we rearranged the pricing structure, the positioning, and the communications, we made sure that we really doubled down on the needs of these two segments. Okay. Again, so this was two segments and not just one. The reason is that this was a larger and more established company. So they could, quote unquote, afford to target two ICPs, which were, by the way, very close to one another. So what we did then is a complete relaunch of the company, meaning we changed the pricing, we changed the branding, we changed the positioning, we changed the pricing structure. And so like a bunch of changes were made, but tweaking the ICP was like a huge part of it. It wasn't the only part because then we had like video campaigns and we had a shit ton of stuff going on. This was a huge campaign. It took 7 months from setup to launch to follow up. It was 6 or 7 months, but what happened was that the monthly recurring revenue of this company jumped 41%. Okay, so like that tells you something about the power. And it stayed there. So it's not just like a flame, like a flash in the pan. It actually stayed there and it was sustained. And then it started slowly growing afterwards. So that tells you the power of focusing in and narrowing in, because everything that we did in this grand campaign was based on it all started with nailing the positioning, and the messaging starts with nailing the ICPs. Okay. And yeah, and by the way, when I started working on that project, I mentioned that it all starts with knowing the customers. So
Yeah.
I didn't, for a week straight, I did nothing but talk to customers.
How did it hit you that this is my ICP, this is my ideal client? How did it hit you?
Good question. So that didn't come easily. Okay. The founders of the company already had a suspicion. Who would it be? It ended up being e-commerce companies, the main ICP. But we didn't want to just leave it there, because what they didn't know, or what they were uncertain of, is, are they really making us a lot of profit? Because they were the biggest spenders, and that was easy to tell. And quick product adoption and everything, but they also were very resource intensive, meaning customer support, machines, servers, bandwidth, etc. So they were also very resource intensive. So one of the things that we did was we went down to look at the profitability level of each segment, meaning segmented all users, put them into one of four segments, buckets, one of them being e-commerce. And then we looked at, okay, what's the total revenue from this segment? And what is the approximated share of customer support resources and tech resources, meaning servers and what that. So we just subtracted the money, and it turned out that they were indeed a profitable segment. So not only did they spend much, yeah, sure, they required a lot of help and fine tuning and tech, but they're profitable, so they were desirable.
Yeah, makes sense. There's just one last two questions left, and we'll leave you after that. A lot of companies struggle with horizontal markets as they're like too big. So how segment that market?
Okay, so an example of a horizontal market is, for example, CRM software. Okay, like most any company on the planet that deals with, especially B2B buyers, but even in a lot of B2C environments, you'll need something where you keep track of customers. But spreadsheets are not the most ideal in most scenarios. So you need a CRM software. And if you wanted to build a CRM software today on the global market, but even in some national markets, that would be pretty tough, because that's already taken. Like a lot of established big players, huge companies. But does that mean you can't make CRM software? No, it doesn't, because the big solutions are also generic ones, meaning that if you have special use cases, then you'll be out of luck with them, or they'll take a lot of customization and they'll perform worse than a specialized solution. Hence the creation of subcategories. So now today you have hospital CRMs and banking CRMs and dog grooming CRMs and whatever, cleaning business CRMs, all designed for specific use cases. And this is what we call like vertical categories or vertical software categories. So when you're on a broad market and you're struggling, then the best thing to do is probably that, to look for one of these specialist categories, or as we said earlier, like a use case, like a specific use case.
Plus, like most of the CRM softwares for the advanced filters, it's price paid. So if a company can reduce on the price, they might.
Yeah.
Good business.
Because another thing that happens is when a category matures, then the leaders will be able to price themselves at a premium. And the reason for that is because when you're the category leader, or one of the few leaders, if you want to take the example of CRM, then you have HubSpot, Salesforce, And they create ecosystems. Because they're the leaders, everybody wants to integrate with them. So because everybody's integrating with them seamlessly, they become a more valuable thing, even if you don't use those integrations and you don't use those features. So you might be a dog grooming company and HubSpot's totally an overkill for you, both pricing wise and feature wise. So if you found a good dog grooming company CRM, then that you would save a bunch of money. It would be faster to set up and it would fit your needs more.
Absolutely.
So that's how you break that down.
Last question. Some AI tools you want to recommend for nailing ICP in 2025?
Oh gosh, I'm a big fan of building your own AI infrastructure. And what I mean by that is I have this vision, and this is what we're building currently for us and for a couple of select clients, is the thing with AI tools when it comes to go to market is that you need like a lot of information and unified information about your company. If you have point solutions, then those point solutions will each need to be fed with information. I'll give you an example. If you have an AI outreach, whatever thing, like a thing that helps you messages, personalized messages with the help of AI, then you're going to need to feed it some data. But the data you feed it is usually going to be limited in scope, and it's going to be, I don't know, it's going to be about your ICP, and it's going to be static stuff. Now, when you think of go-to-market as in sales, marketing, customer success as a one unified system, which it is, which it should be, where functions are aligned, then you'll realize that without like unified data and unified knowledge, it's not going to happen. So why build another fragmented system with the help of AI? And why not build this one GTM knowledge base, which has sales data, marketing data, customer success data, all the sales calls, reachable, accessible, summarized, and everything else? Because at the end of the day, the way this is going to be an ideal system is that your customer success is going to have access to the sales calls, and your marketing is going to have access to the customer success information and the sales information. And so the way you build that connected is that you build like one knowledge source, which again, product usage data, whatever you can think of, whatever makes sense, just one thing. And then you're building specialized AI tools to access this big pool of data and knowledge. And that's how you're going to have a unified system. So my favorite thing is the one that we're building.
Wow, that's really good. I mean,
which uses agents and
price-based. How are you planning to do it? And we'll be the first ones to try.
Yeah, okay. So currently what's happening is that we're implementing this as a service. So we're building the knowledge base and we're building the agents that are and the workflows that are specifically needed. Okay, because a lot of this is just workflows and it's not even AI, but AI is involved one way or another in almost everything. So it's just good old make.com, N8N, and Relevance AI, and all those tools that are like a part of the stack.
That's pretty cool. That's great.
Dan, it was lovely talking to you. It was very insightful, and all the best to your new AI launching very soon.
Good.
And where can people reach out to you? LinkedIn or email?
Yeah, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. You'll find me, Dan Renyi, and you'll just find me and connect, DM, whatever. And that's the best way to find me.
Perfect. Thank you so
ladies.
much.
Thanks a lot.